I knew something was wrong the moment my Outlook pinged with a calendar invite for a mandatory sync. At exactly 9:13 a.m. on a random Tuesday. Not 9 o'clock, not 9:15, 9:13, like they were trying to catch me emotionally jet-lagged. I opened the invite, and my stomach dropped. It was from Greg in HR. Subject line, realignment strategy touchpoint. That's corporate, for oh, we're about to screw you, and we're not even pretending to be subtle about it. When I walked into conference room B, it smelled like fresh carpet, glue, and quiet betrayal. Greg was already there, perched on the edge of the table like a smug little gargoyle. And beside him was Martin, my boss. 12 years I gave that man, and he sat there, eyes glued to a lukewarm cup of Starbucks like it contained the meaning of life. Couldn't even look at me. Greg smiled, the kind of smile you see on a used car salesman who's 2 weeks from a foreclosure. Ashley, thanks for coming. I know this is short notice. My chair was already pulled out. That's never a good sign. They only do that when it's a performance plan, a firing, or a human sacrifice. Then came the speech. Oh, the speech. As part of our efforts to streamline operational efficiency and enhance cross-functional synergies, your role has been identified as redundant. Translation: we don't want to pay your senior-level salary anymore, so we hired an intern who just learned Excel and will do your job for $40,000 and a pizza party. I blinked once, then again, waiting for Martin to speak, to say anything. But he just nodded like a broken bobblehead, still refusing to look up from his mediocre latte. I must have blacked out for a second, because suddenly, Greg was sliding a manila folder toward me like he was dealing blackjack in a casino of sadness. Here's your separation packet, he said, like it was a party favor from a toddler's birthday. You'll find the terms of your severance agreement, COBRA information, and final paycheck schedule. We appreciate your service. He added, that word appreciately landed like a slap made of sarcasm and broken promises. I barely opened my mouth to ask why, when Martin stood up like the meeting was over. Greg will walk you out, he said, already halfway out the door. Walk me out, like I was a shoplifter. Like I hadn't trained 3 departments, survived 2 acquisitions, and migrated an entire platform solo. Greg stood up, gave me that half-smile that HR folks do, the one that says, this isn't personal, but actually means, I get paid to pretend I care. I barely remember gathering my stuff. My nameplate, a cracked mug from the 2014 all-hand, a photo of my dog Maple wearing a Santa hat. The little cactus from my window that Greg said I technically couldn't take because it was company property. I took it anyway. Come for me, Greg. And as I walked through the sterile halls, the ones I'd basically helped build, a single thought screamed in my skull louder than the heels. Clacking behind me, they didn't just fire me. They erased me. Hey, if you've stuck around this long, you're already part of the 3% who don't ghost me like Greg did. 97% of people watching don't subscribe. And I'm chasing my first 10,000 subscribers like it's a severance package that respects me. So hit that button like your HR and I just asked for fair pay. Back at my apartment, I sat on the floor with a box of my career on one side and Maple on the other. She licked my hand like she somehow knew I had always imagined I'd leave that job on my own terms. Instead, I left with a manila folder, a sarcastic branded pen, and a deep, aching sense of injustice. But here's the thing about getting kicked down. Eventually, you stop falling. Eventually, you hit the ground. And then, you start crawling through the rubble. I didn't sleep that night. Not even close. My brain was a rage laundromat set on tumble-dry-high. I thought about every PowerPoint deck I ever built to bail them out. Every weekend I sacrificed so Martin could disconnect with family. Every time I kept quiet when Greg tanked another diversity initiative by handing out company logo tote bags like that made him an ally. By 3:47 a.m. I had 2 tabs open, standard severance packages for senior roles in our niche. A Word doc titled, "What I Deserve." Spoiler alert, it was not what Greg had handed me like a crumpled napkin. I didn't show up for the follow-up meeting like someone attending a consultation. I came dressed for court. Printouts, annotated PDFs, a binder full of sticky notes, even wore the navy blazer they gave me at my 10-year anniversary just for the poetic burn. Greg was already there, sipping a Diet Coke like it was sacramental wine. He didn't say hi, he said, "Let's make this quick." I opened with numbers.com collected, even as my stomach tried to turn itself inside out. "Greg," I said, "for someone with my tenure and level, industry standard is 3 to 6 months severance. What you offered doesn't even cover Cobra and a month's rent." He gave me that robot HR face, designed for fake empathy. "I understand this is difficult, Ashley. Unfortunately, it's standard policy." That phrase, standard policy. I blinked. Okay, but we both know standard policy isn't a legal term. I've watched employees in marketing walk away with double what I was offered. And they were only there 2 years. He didn't flinch. "That's confidential. I can't discuss other severance packages. What I can say is that this is what's offered in your case. It's non-negotiable." Non-negotiable. It hit like a sour note in a breakup song. He might as well have said, "We know you're worth more. We're just betting you won't fight us." I leaned in. "So, 12 years, and I get 2 weeks' pay, a mental health flyer, and a reminder I'm replaceable." Greg did his best. HR gremlin face. "Ashley, you're not replaceable. You're valued. We appreciate your contributions." "Then why are you kicking me out like I just peed on the server rack?" Silence. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and then the chant. "I'm sorry, Ashley. It's standard policy. It's not personal." My laugh startled even me. Sharp, bitter. "Oh, it's not personal. Tell that to the 12 Christmas parties I planned, to the budgets I salvaged with duct tape and cold brew, to the time I rewrote your entire day slide deck because you spelled inclusion wrong." His nostrils flared. Closest I've ever seen him get to a real emotion. "I understand. You're upset, but this is the offer. It's final." And that's when it hit me. They didn't expect me to ask questions. They put a price tag on my silence and assumed I'd be too tired, too loyal, too broken to push back. But I wasn't just angry, I was insulted. They wanted clean hands and a quiet exit, a tidy little burial. No mess, no noise, no trace. Greg slid the folder across the table again like it was some kind of truce. "Just sign," he said, "and we'll get your final paycheck processed." I stared at it. At the sad little severance, at the NDA, at the line that said I waived all future claims against the company. And right then, something old and sharp inside me, something I didn't even know was still alive, caught fire. "I'll review it," I said flatly, standing. Greg blinkered. "You're not signing. Not today. Not until someone else looks at it." His jaw twitched. "You're entitled to counsel, of course. But just so you know, nothing will change. It's standard if you say standard policy one more time." I interrupted. "I swear to God, I will tattoo it across your forehead in Comic Sans." I left, binder in hand, head high, and for the first time since they yanked the floor out from under me, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a woman, done being polite, back home. I realized just how many documents I'd quietly hoarded over the years. Manuals, pay stubs, memos, random emails flagged high importance, that had aged like milk, so I fed them to the shredder. All of it, a whirlwind of paper and rage. My 2020 performance review, gone. My employee appreciation certificate, signed by someone who spelled my name wrong, obliterated. That HR memo about proper lunchroom etiquette from 2018, history, half a bottle of wine in my living room looked like a crime scene between a tax audit and a nervous breakdown. Maple, my dog, watched from the couch with the same quiet judgment I imagined Greg's employee handbook was full of. I raised my glass to her. To 12 years of loyalty, I slurred, and 2 weeks of severance. Cheers, corporate America. The shredder jammed halfway through a stack of Q2 vision alignment handouts. I took that as a sign from the universe to sit my ass down. My fingers ached. My heart did too. I had nothing left to prove, and nothing worth keeping except except buried in the back of an old leather accordion folder, wedged behind some dusty business cards and a faded birthday note from 8. I found it, my original employment offer, dated February 6, 2012. The paper was yellowed at the corners, still smelling faintly of stale printer ink and first-day hope. I flipped through it, not expecting much. The base salary outdated, vacation accrual already used. Some bit about an ergonomic desk assessment I never got, classic. And then, deep in the fine print, past the NDA, past the arbitration clause, right there, bottom of page 6, all unvested shares under the Employee Equity Incentive Plan shall become fully vested upon termination of employment by the company without cause. I blinked, then blinked again. Wait, what? I read it 5 more times, slowly. Every word burned into my brain like a sunrise I didn't expect. Fully vested upon, termination without cause. Greg's exact words had been, "This isn't personal. This restructuring isn't performance-based." Which meant they didn't fire me for cause. Which meant every single unvested share, every forgotten refresh grant, every dusty piece of paper they had quietly ignored for years, could now be mine. Not maybe, not subject to board approval. Mine. Hope doesn't always arrive gently. Sometimes it hits you like a lightning bolt cracking open a dead tree. I sat there, stunned, hands gripping that paper like it might vanish if I blinked too hard, and then I moved. Fast, took a photo of the clause, then another, then a video, just in case the universe decided to fry my phone out of spite. I didn't know how many shares were technically still pending, didn't know the current market price post-acquisition, didn't care. What I did know was this. Greg and his smug little folder had just handed me a fully loaded legal weapon, and they didn't even realize they'd cocked the hammer. I googled, employment lawyer equity clause. I fell down a rabbit hole of LinkedIn bios and Yelp reviews, but most of them felt wrong. Too polished, too vague. To firm handshake over firm answers. And then I found her, Brenda Choi. Boutique employment law specialist. Her office was above a laundromat. No cheesy slogans, no marble lobby, just 5-star reviews and one testimonial that said, "Brenda made my old company wish they'd never hired me." Perfect. I didn't sleep much that night either, but this time it wasn't from anxiety. It was adrenaline. It was planning. Her law office looked like it hadn't been updated since the first Bush administration. No glass walls, no espresso machines, no receptionist in pencil skirts, just a scratched wooden sign that said Brenda Choi-esque, and a bell that sounded like it belonged in a ghost town general store. I rang it, nothing. Rang it again. From behind a door. Yeah, I heard you come in. Unless you're selling toner, hold your horses. I stepped inside and immediately tripped over a box labeled Deposition. Transcripts, 2016. The whole place smelled like burnt coffee and worn out laser printers. A fan rotated slowly over a stack of precarious manila folders. Behind a cluttered desk sat a woman in a flannel shirt and Converse. One eye narrowed at her tablet like it had personally betrayed her. This was Brenda. She didn't look like the Ivy League lawyers I'd imagined while rage Googling at 4 a.m. She looked like she could win a poker game, walk out with your car, and still represent you the next day. "You're Ashley?" she asked, without looking up. "My friend Jaime said you got hosed. Sit, let's hear it." I hesitated. That wine-fueled confidence from the night before had vanished. What if I was wrong? What if I'd misread the clause? What if I was just ... being dramatic? Brenda raised an eyebrow and tapped her pen. "Clock's ticking. I don't do emotional support. I do legal blood sport. Talk." So I talked. I laid it all out. The surprise meeting, Greg's smug grin, Martin's silence, the sad little Severance, and then I handed her the offer letter. "Page 6, I said. "Last paragraph." She read it once, then again, set the paper down slowly, leaned back in her chair like a lion who'd just spotted a limping gazelle. "Tell me," she said, "they didn't include this clause in your separation agreement. They didn't mention shares at all." Brenda's smile was slow, wicked, electric. "Oh," she said, "they are going to regret being so standard." Something clicked inside me. It wasn't just that. I'd found a lawyer. I'd found my lawyer. Brenda wasn't the type to politely negotiate and draft a heartfelt email about misunderstandings. She was the kind who flipped tables with legal precedent in hand. "They might argue the clause doesn't apply anymore," I said cautiously. My voice was steadier than I felt, but my nerves were doing backflips. Brenda snorted. "They can argue the moon's made of cheese. Doesn't mean it'll hold up in arbitration." She tapped the clause again. "This language is clean, airtight, stupidly specific. They terminated you without cause, right?" "Right, that's what Greg said. Word for word." "Then these shares are yours." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding since that damn Outlook invite. Brenda steepled her fingers. "So now the question is, do you want a check, or do you want revenge?" I blinked. "Can I say both?" Her grin stretched wider. "Now you're speaking my language." She pulled out a legal pad and began scribbling like a woman possessed. "We're not just going to ask for the shares. We're going to make it clear they screwed up. Omitted a material clause in your severance. That's not just negligence. That's deliberate suppression." She flipped to a new page. "And this whole standard policy nonsense, that's our Trojan horse. They thought you wouldn't look too closely. They bet on your silence." Brenda leaned back, tapping her pen against her teeth. "Oh honey," she said, eyes twinkling. "They are going to panic so hard Greg might finally break a sweat." That moment shifted something in me. I wasn't the same woman who had walked into her office clutching a manila folder like it was a death sentence. I had fire now. A lawyer with teeth. A target. I didn't just want compensation anymore. I wanted recognition. I wanted them to feel it. I want them to know they underestimated me. I whispered. Brenda looked up. "They will. The second they open my letter, they'll realize they didn't fire a compliant employee. They created a shareholder with a grudge." She chuckled. "And grudge-holding shareholders, those are my favorite kind." The next few days were agony. Time moved like molasses. In January, Brenda had warned me, "Once I start writing, don't hover. Let the hunter hunt." Easy for her to say, she was the predator. I was the anxious sidekick, pacing my apartment like a Roomba with unresolved trauma. By Monday, 9 a.m., I was riding a wave of hope. By noon, I was refreshing the stock app like it owed me money. By 2 p.m., I was neck-deep in Reddit threads about equity clawbacks, and Googling can companies retroactively void vesting clauses. In a panic, I called Brenda. She picked up mid-yawn like I'd interrupted a power nap. Don't tell me you've been reading Quora. I just needed to check if there's no loophole, Ashley. You're covered. Let me work. But what if she snapped her gum loud enough to reset my nervous system? The only way you lose is if you start doubting me. Do I sound unsure? She didn't. She sounded like someone who once sued a telecom giant and won enough to buy a duplex in Silver Lake. I sighed. Sorry, what if I imagined it all wrong? You didn't, she said. And even if you did, I didn't, and I'm better at this than they are. I laughed weakly. She added, you really think a guy like Greg reads contracts? That man probably signs birthday cards with a stamp. That settled me. Enough to stave off Reddit for another 2 hours, at least. But the wait was torture. Brenda wasn't just slapping together a "hey, you missed something" email. She was crafting a surgical strike. The tone matters, she'd told me. We're not begging, we're not even demanding. We're educating them on how epically they messed up. Her plan was threefold. Quote the clause, directly and clearly. Reference Greg's language in the termination meeting. Not performance-based, not personal. Frame it as a breach of good faith. You don't have to list every benefit in a severance agreement, Brenda explained. But when you omit a clause worth hundreds of thousands, it starts to look like deliberate concealment. It felt like prepping for war. Only I had armor made of bubble wrap and adrenaline. She had steel. Day 3. I cracked again. I texted her, me. What if they ignore the letter? Brenda, then I subpoena Greg and ask him to define standard policy in front of a judge. God, I loved her. Day 4, I drove by the office, just once. Oka 3 times. I parked across the street and stared at the building I'd poured 12 years into. Behind those tinted windows, someone was eating catered lunch. Maybe celebrating Greg finally learning how to CC. And for the first time, I didn't feel pain. I felt detachment. That place didn't owe me anymore. Couldn't hurt me unless I let it. What it could do. Pay me handsomely. That night, Brenda called, just 2 words. It's ready. I held my breath. I'll send it in the morning. 9 a.m. sharp. Are you sure it's bulletproof? I asked. She didn't even pause. I cited precedent from 2015 where a company tried the same stunt and got legally pantsed in arbitration. We're not asking for the shares, Ashley. We're planting a flag. We're telling them, we see your games, and we play better. I hung up and stared at my ceiling until sunrise. Hope wasn't shaky anymore. It was dense, alive, heavy in my chest like something that mattered. The email hit inboxes at 9:01 a.m. Brenda had it queued like a missile launch. Subject line, regarding equity clause and termination, Ashley, more no fluff. No exclamation points, just surgical precision. I was on my couch, coffee untouched, watching the digital clock tick. 9:01, sent 9:05, no reply. 9:07, I checked Wi-Fi. 9:10, I wondered if Outlook had gone down. 9:12, I checked notification settings like they'd betrayed me. By 10:30, Maple was giving me a look like, you need to go outside or you're going to explode. I hadn't eaten, just chewed a stale Pop-Tart and stared blankly at a book I couldn't read. That letter was out there now. floating in someone's inbox like a grenade with the pin pulled, and the silence was nuclear. I checked LinkedIn. Nothing. No new posts. No Greg activity. The CEO's profile still had that same smug 2016 headshot back when the company was small. The coffee was bad, and people still smiled in the break room. No reactions. No job changes. No signs of implosion. At 3:42 p.m., I finally got a text. 3 words. Brenda, still quiet, good. I wanted noise, screaming, chaos, a full boardroom meltdown. But Brenda was right. Quiet meant panic. Quiet meant they were already in a closed-door meeting. Reading her email, rereading it, printing it, underlining words with red pens like it would change anything. I barely slept that night, had dreams of spreadsheets catching fire, of Greg trying to explain standard policy to a judge while his tie caught on fire. Woke up at 2:14 a.m. convinced I missed a reply. I hadn't. Still nothing. By morning, the waiting had become my second job. Made a spreadsheet titled Potential Outcomes. Column A, they fold immediately. Column B, they push back and lose. Column C, Greg gets fired and starts a podcast called HR Unfiltered. Maple snored through my theorizing like she'd heard it all before. At 10:06 a.m., my phone buzzed. Kelsey, former co-worker, sweet, ran internal comms. We hadn't spoken since I was walked out. Her message was just one word. Oh my God. No context, no emojis, just those 3 letters. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. 2 minutes later, another message. You didn't hear this from me, but something's happening. I didn't even blink. That was it. The grenade had landed. Brenda's letter wasn't just a legal threat, was a mirror. And they didn't like what they saw. Emails were being forwarded. Calendars cleared. Legal pads filled with frantic scribbles. The house of glass. Cracking. I still didn't know whether they'd fight or fold. But one thing was crystal clear. I wasn't the one sweating anymore. The next morning, 7:14 a.m. way too early for anything civil. My phone rang again. Martin. Yep. That Martin, Mr. Lukewarm Starbucks, Mr. Cowardly Bobblehead. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity beat contempt. Hello, I said, already bracing. No greeting. Ashley, what the hell did you do? His voice was panicked, not angry, not confrontational, panicked, like someone who'd just woken up to a fire and realized he was the one who left the stove on. I leaned back on the couch, cradled my coffee mug, and smiled. Morning, Martin, long time. Don't do that. Don't be smug. He sounded ragged, like he hadn't slept. It was glorious. Do you have any idea what's happening here? Oh, I had ideas. But I let him flail. You blindsided them, he said, breathless. That letter. It's being passed around like a virus. Legals in a tailspin. I got dragged into a 6 a.m. emergency call with the GC, the CFO, and God help me Greg. I took a slow sip of coffee, and here, I thought Greg only worked banker's hours. This isn't funny, he snapped. Do you even understand what those shares represent? Oh Martin. Sweet, spineless Martin. I had read the clause. I understood it better than you ever would. That vesting clause triggered a full reclassification of our equity pool, he continued. Finance is panicking. They're saying your shares could account for nearly 13% of the last grant. I let out a low whistle. I hadn't done the math yet. Brenda was still combing the fine print. But 13%? Didn't you all announce a new options pool in that queue to release? I asked, all wide-eyed innocence. Martin groaned. Exactly. You were still on the eligibility list. You were supposed to phase out after the next review cycle, but they... Forgot to update the roster in time. The retention went through before the Atri system flagged the update. I let that hang in the air for a beat. Oops, I said. He wasn't amused. They're calling it an earnings impact. It's not just a payout anymore, it's a governance issue. There it was, the heart of it. They hadn't just accidentally owed me money. They'd handed me the keys to a vault and forgot to lock the door. What about the CEO? I asked. He's livid, Martin said. He walked out of the meeting, said heads need to roll. There's talk of disciplinary action, maybe even a board review. I didn't even bother hiding the grin. Greg looks like he's about to cry, Martin muttered. That part almost made me feel bad. Almost. You're not seriously going to keep pushing this, are you? He asked. You got your severance. Why stir the pot? I let the silence stretch a little too long. Because you treated me like I was disposable, I said calmly. You thought I'd nod, pack my things, and vanish. But I read the fine print. Martin, no response. You didn't just kick me out, I continued. You turned me into a shareholder with enough equity to be a problem, a big one. He exhaled like he'd just lost a lawsuit and custody. I liked you, Ashley, he said softly. I leaned forward. No, Martin, you liked having me around to do your job. You liked not dealing with details like contracts, like clauses. Then I added, just loud enough, the thing about details. They don't care if you ignore them. They're still true. And I hung up. No goodbye, no thank you. Just click. I tossed my phone on the couch like it was buzzing with radiation. My pulse.com, my focus. Razor-sharp.up in their ivory tower of jargon and alignment. The walls were cracking, and all I had done was read the thing they told me not to bother understanding. Then the email came, wrapped in the fakest layer of civility I'd ever seen. Subject, request for discussion and clarification, equity agreement from executive operations, not even a real person. Just a vague, shiny-sounding department name. The tone was all polished concern. They wanted to review and clarify mutual understandings regarding recent correspondence. Corporate speak for, please come in before you dismantle us with actual law. Brenda read the email aloud in a syrupy preschool teacher voice. Oh, how sweet, she said, slamming her laptop shut. They're trying to get ahead of the train after. They already heard the whistle and saw the smoke. We scheduled the meeting for Friday, same building, same floor, same sterile boardroom. But this time, I wasn't carrying a cardboard box. I wasn't being escorted. I wasn't invisible. I was expected. Walking into that boardroom felt like stepping onto a stage I had once been dragged across in silence, but this time, I was in full armor. Brenda led the way, confident and calm, in a navy suit that looked soft enough to pet but sharp enough to slice through steel. I wore black, not funeral black, statement black, unapologetic black. Inside, the room was already packed. 6 people sat at the table. 2 more stood by the wall with laptops open. Legal had brought reinforcements. At the head of the table sat Dan Falk, the CEO himself, tanned, tight-skinned, Botoxed into something that vaguely resembled remorse, but not real remorse. Just the kind people wear like a costume when they've been caught. Greg was there too. He looked like a human power outage pal, sweaty, like he hadn't eaten or slept in days. A walking oops. Dan stood as we entered. Ashley, thank you for coming. We appreciate the opportunity to speak in person. Brenda dropped her binder on the table with a satisfying thud. Let's talk about this standard policy you've all been waving around like it overrides signed contracts, she said flatly. Silence. She reached over, tapped her laptop, and the projector behind us blinked to life. Up popped the class my clause. Highlighted, underlined, annotated, and weaponized. All unvested shares under the Employee Equity Incentive Plan shall become fully vested upon termination of employment by the company without cause. Brenda read it aloud, like scripture at a legal exorcism. One of the lawyers opened his mouth, but she raised a finger. "Let's start with Greg," she said, like she was calling on a student who forgot his homework. Greg looked like a possum who realized the headlights weren't slowing down. I didn't see this clause at the time," he stammered. "It wasn't in the severance template." Brenda clicked her pen. "And yet it was in her original, signed employment agreement, which supersedes any internal template. Unless, of course, your definition of good faith includes deliberately omitting critical compensation terms." A low murmur ran across the table. One of the assistants coughed into their sleeve. Dan leaned forward, trying to regain ground. "Look, we're not here to debate language. We want to make this right." Brenda smiled. "No warmth. Then let's begin by acknowledging the shares vested the moment you terminated Ms. Moore." A different lawyer, older, clearly the most senior legal counsel, finally spoke. "We could discuss an alternative arrangement. A buyback, perhaps?" "No," I said. Every head turned. It was the first time I'd spoken, and my voice didn't shake. "I'm not here to sell them. I'm not here to settle. I'm here to remind you I was never your mistake. I was your blind spot, and now I'm your problem." Brenda gave me the smallest nod approval. Pride, wartime, solidarity. Dan rubbed his temple. "Ashley, we're trying to be reasonable." "Reasonable?" Brenda echoed. "You know what would have been reasonable? Including that clause in her exit paperwork. Not firing someone without reviewing the contract. Or, I don't know, maybe not letting Greg handle anything more complicated than a coffee order." Greg visibly flinched. I almost felt bad. Almost. The meeting dragged on for 40 more minutes. Legal danced, Brenda countered. Their carefully polished negotiation strategy was unraveling thread by thread. And the best part? We still hadn't named our price. They thought this was a negotiation. That we were here to talk it out. What they meant was, let's see how little we can pay to make this problem go away. But when they realized we weren't playing that game, they got nervous. Then desperate, by the time the fourth lawyer tried to invoke the spirit of the agreement. Brenda actually laughed. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping the corner of her eye. "Did you just say the spirit of the agreement?" She turned her laptop to face the table again. The clause was now printed, tabbed, and practically glowing. "Courts don't award damages based on vibes. They award based on what you signed. What your CEO initialed, what your board approved. This clause is a loaded gun, and you put it in her hands the second you walked her out the door with a branded pen and a severance package that wouldn't cover Cobra." The head legal counsel adjusted his tie like it was choking him. "When we reviewed the intent," he began. Brenda's eyes narrowed. "Intent? Your intent was to fire her without paying what she was owed. California contract law doesn't care what you meant. It only cares what's written." Dan exhaled, long, slow, defeated. "Look," he said finally, "we don't want a prolonged dispute. We're prepared to make a generous offer to resolve this." He nodded to the lawyer next to him, who slid a folded sheet across the table. Brenda didn't touch it. Neither did I. So the lawyer opened it. "One-time payment," he said. "Liquid value of the shares, plus 20%, clean. Final, wired, today. You sign an NDA, and we all walk away happy." I looked at the number. It was laughable. Maybe a third of what the shares were worth. If I held through Q4, maybe a tenth if the rumored merger happened, It wasn't a settlement. It was a muzzle tied in a bow. I met Dan's eyes. No, his smile froze. No, no, I repeated. Come clear. That's not even close. I'm not interested in silence. I turned to Brenda. She straightened her blazer like she'd been waiting for that cue. Let me be perfectly clear, she said, voice like ice. You have two options. Option 1. By close of business today, you wire the full market value of all vested shares, based on the termination date. No conditions. No NDA. No strings. Just what she's owed. A pause. The room held its breath. Option 2. One of the lawyers asked, already regretting it. Brenda smiled. Option 2. She keeps the shares. Becomes an active shareholder. Starts filing motions. The first, a demand to audit the company's termination practices, specifically those involving unvested equity. She leaned forward. We'll be asking for board meeting minutes, executive compensation plans, and Greg's HR credentials. Greg audibly whimpered. And just so everyone's clear, Brenda added sweetly, those shareholder rights, we'll be exercising them publicly. Which means press coverage, investor calls, the phrase bad faith termination appearing in earnings transcripts. The color drained from Dan's face. He looked like someone had unplugged him. I leaned in, folding my hands on the table. You treated me like I was disposable, I said softly. Now I'm the crack in your balance sheet. Dead silence. Then Dan turned to legal. Voice taut as piano wire. Draft the wire paperwork. No handshake, no apology. Just an ending. As Brenda and I walked out of that boardroom, same hallway, same sterile walls, same fake plant in the corner, I didn't feel heavy anymore. I felt weightless. The receptionist, the same one who once asked me to refill the coffee pods, gave me a forced smile as we passed. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The air had changed. Everyone felt it. Brenda nudged me just before we reached the elevator. They'll remember this one, she said, a smirk curling at the edge of her mouth. You didn't just get even. You got equity. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing off the past in a perfect, cinematic moment. We didn't talk on the ride down. We didn't need to. It was done. And it was far from silent. 4 hours later, the wire hit my account. 7 digits deep. No NDA, no concessions. Just what they owed me plus the cost of underestimating me. I didn't pop champagne. Didn't post a humble brag on LinkedIn. Didn't even text Martin back when he messaged me a vague hope you're doing well. Instead, I fed Maple a second dinner and opened a bottle of wine. Then I deleted every single email folder with that company's name on it. Clean slate. They erased me. They thought I'd go quietly. They thought I'd forget how hard I worked, how much I gave, how often I swallowed my own voice. They were wrong. I came back as a shareholder, as a problem with a paper trail and a lawyer who could outgun their entire legal department in a hoodie and sneakers. You know, a lot of people talk about reading the fine print like it's some kind of cliché. Let me tell you something. The fine print is where the real story lives, where the loopholes breathe, where the powerful get sloppy and the underestimated find oxygen. They taught me that when they walked me out with a manila folder and a fake smile, I taught them something too. Sometimes the people you try to silence are the ones who come back with the loudest receipts. And if you've made it this far, you're not just watching a story, you're part of the 3% who don't ghost me like Greg. You're the real ones. The legends of the break room. So here's what I'll ask. Hit that subscribe button like your HR and I just asked for fair pay. Smash it like it's labeled standard policy in Comic Sans. Because I've got more chaos to share. More stories they don't want told. More fine print to read aloud with the whole mic on. This wasn't a rant. This was a reckoning. So next time someone tries to walk you out with your cactus and a coffee mug, remember, you might be walking out of their building, but you're walking into your power. And hey Greg, hope you like podcasts. I hear How Not to Handle an Exit has an opening for a guest speaker. I'll be over here feeding my dog, sipping wine, and watching the numbers rise. I didn't just survive. I won, and I'm just getting started.